Get away from me! Someone call 911 right now! That's HOA President Brenda Hartwick shrieking at sunrise while pure chaos erupted on my private family ranch. The one she'd boldly invited 900 strangers to camp on by selling them $50 permits to my land. 3 generations of Texas blood and dirt, and this entitled Karen sends out flyers inviting the whole county to my pastures like it's some public campground. Families grilling breakfast, kids asking for bathrooms, tents packed like Coachella, all thinking they had permission to be there. The smell of morning coffee hung in the air. Then I quietly opened every gate and released my bulls. What happened next? Tents collapsed like dominoes. Tables flipped end over end. People in pajamas sprinted screaming, kids crying, Brenda's high heels sinking in mud as she scrambled for safety, clipboard flying through the dust. What would you do? Drop your state below. Texas crew, where y'all at? Like if you'd defend your land. My name's Jake Thornton, 52 years old with calloused hands and 3 generations of Texas ranch blood pumping through my veins. Every morning I wake up to the sound of 12 prize Angus bulls snorting in the pre-dawn darkness, worth about 15 grand each, more money than most folks around here see in a year. The 40-acre spread my granddaddy bought in 1953 sits smack dab next to the fanciest HOA development in Millbrook County, Sunset Meadows, 800 McMansions packed tighter than cattle in a drought, where grown adults get fined for having the wrong shade of beige mailbox. That's where I first met the devil in designer heels. Mr. Thornton! The screech cut through my peaceful Tuesday morning like a rusty gate. Brenda Hartwick climbed out of her white Escalade, blonde bob helmet perfect despite the Texas wind. The smell of her expensive perfume mixed with diesel fumes from my old Ford pickup, 2 worlds colliding in my gravel driveway. I'm Brenda Hartwick, president of the Sunset Meadows HOA. She pronounced it like she was announcing royalty, her blood-red fingernails gleaming in the morning sun. We need to discuss your property's impact on our community. Here's what you gotta understand about property lines in Texas. My ranch sits on the original 1973 survey, but when they built that fancy subdivision, they eyeballed the boundary based on an old fence line. Problem is, that fence sits 50 feet inside my actual property, meaning 15 years of HOA joggers had been trespassing on Thornton land every single morning. I'd been too polite to mention it. Big mistake. Your cattle create health hazards, Brenda announced, waving a thick folder like a weapon. We're demanding you grant us permanent easement rights for our nature trail system. The morning coffee suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. My wife Sarah was inside getting ready for work. We both needed our jobs to keep this ranch afloat after 3 bad years and mounting vet bills. Our kids had fled to Dallas, leaving us with 12 temperamental bulls and a mortgage that kept me awake nights. And if I refuse? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her smile could have frozen hell over. Code enforcement, noise violations, agricultural zoning challenges, property liens. Each threat rolled off her tongue like she'd practiced. Most HOA residents kept their heads down around Brenda, terrified of property value drops and endless violation notices. She'd built her power base on fear, younger families worried about resale values, retirees afraid of legal costs. But a few older neighbors, ranchers like me who remembered when this was all open country, quietly nodded their support when they thought no one was looking. After her Escalade disappeared in a cloud of dust and arrogance, I spent the afternoon learning about Brenda Hartwick. Turns out she'd been busy, real busy. 3 local ranchers mentioned her improvement suggestions. 2 had been forced to sell after mysterious code enforcement campaigns that somehow always ended with Brenda's real estate company handling the sales. The county clerk's office revealed the real kicker. Brenda had been listing my ranch as future community park expansion in HOA newsletters for 2 years. She got 6% commission on any land purchases the HOA made. The texture of those old documents felt rough under my weathered fingers as I realized I'd been played from day one. Old Hank Morrison at the surveyor's office just laughed when I mentioned her name. That woman's collected more commission checks than a Vegas card dealer. Always finds a way to convince folks their land's worth more in someone else's hands. But here's what Brenda didn't know, what nobody knew except the dusty courthouse records. My property line extended 50 feet beyond that old fence, meaning her precious nature trail ran straight across Thornton land without permission. 15 years of trespassing at roughly 200 joggers per day. In Texas, That's called adverse use. And it comes with a price tag. That night, lying next to Sarah's sleeping form, listening to bull snorts drifting through our bedroom window, I made a decision that would change everything. Brenda Hartwick thought she could intimidate a Texas rancher into giving up his family's land. She was about to learn why that's never a good idea. 2 weeks later, Brenda made her first real move. I was checking the water troughs when the whine of a chainsaw cut through the morning air like a wounded animal. By the time I jogged over to the fence line, 3 of my cedar posts lay scattered on the ground like fallen soldiers. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted over the noise. Brenda stood there in her pristine white pantsuit, directing some contractor with a measuring tape while he revved up for another cut. "Your fence is 3 feet onto HOA property, Mr. Thornton. We're correcting the boundary violation." The smell of fresh-cut cedar mixed with sawdust as I watched this woman destroy fence posts my daddy had set 40 years ago. Her blood-red fingernails caught the sunlight as she waved a crumpled paper like it was the Constitution itself. Professional measurement shows clear encroachment. Now, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I know bull when I smell it. That fence line had been agreed upon by my daddy and the original developers back in 1982. More importantly, I'd spent the last 2 weeks doing homework at the courthouse that would make a law professor proud. "Tell you what," I said, loud enough for her contractor to hear, "let's make this real interesting. If you're right about the boundary, I'll move my fence tomorrow and pay for the work myself. But if you're wrong..." I let that hang in the air like morning mist over the creek. Here's what Brenda didn't know. I'd already paid old Hank Morrison $300 to do a proper GPS survey of my entire property. The original 1973 survey documents weren't just courthouse decoration. They showed my land extending 53 feet beyond the current fence line, right into what Brenda thought was HOA territory. I remembered reading about property law back when Sarah was taking night classes. Something called adverse use caught my attention. When someone uses your land without permission, you can recover damages at fair market rental rates. 15 years of trespass by roughly 200 joggers per day, on land worth about $4 per acre daily rent. That math worked out to $2,800 per year in damages. But Texas law made it even sweeter. Property owners can claim triple damages for willful trespass, meaning potentially $8,400 plus attorney fees and court costs. I filed that information away like ammunition for later. The real bombshell came 3 days later when Hank Morrison called with news that made my coffee taste like pure victory. "Jake, you ain't gonna believe what I found digging through those corporate records." Hank's gravelly voice crackled through the phone. "That HOA never filed proper incorporation papers with the state. Brenda's been operating without legal authority for 2 solid years. I nearly choked on my breakfast. Come again? Nonprofit corporation registration expired in 2022. She's been collecting dues, making rules, and threatening folks with an organization that doesn't legally exist. It's like being arrested by someone wearing a fake badge." Now that was the kind of information that could change everything. Brenda had been bluffing with a busted hand, and I was the only one who knew it. My counterattack started simple but effective. Sarah's cousin Tommy, fresh out of law school and hungry for his first real case, drafted a certified letter that was poetry in legal language. Immediate cessation of fence removal, demand for $2,800 in back damages for unauthorized trail use, and notice that further property destruction would trigger criminal charges. But I didn't stop there. While Tommy worked his magic with threatening letters, I installed 6 security cameras along the true property line, the one established by GPS survey, not Brenda's fantasy measurements. Every morning jogger, every dog walker, every HOA resident who crossed onto my land got documented with timestamp and photo evidence. The sound of my cordless drill boring into fence posts mixed with growing satisfaction as I mounted no trespassing signs every 50 feet. Bright orange survey flags marked the true property corners like battle standards, creating a barrier even Brenda couldn't ignore. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Within a week, confused residents started asking uncomfortable questions. Why were there suddenly trespassing signs on their community trail? Who authorized destroying Jake's fence? And most importantly, if that rancher was right about the boundary, what else had their HOA president gotten wrong? The crunch of gravel announced daily visitors now. Neighbors who'd avoided eye contact for years suddenly found excuses to chat. Mrs. Patterson mentioned her property survey looked different from the HOA version. Old Pete Kowalski wondered why his fence seemed misplaced too. The real satisfaction came when Brenda returned, minus the contractor this time. Her Escalade's engine ticked in the heat as she stared at my newly posted signs, face redder than a prize bull's ass. "You can't just put up signs wherever you want," she sputtered. "Actually," I said, tapping one of those orange survey flags, "I can put signs anywhere on my own property. Real question is, what you planning to do about 15 years worth of trespassers?" The look on her face was worth every penny of that survey. Brenda's revenge came swift and nasty, like a rattlesnake strike on a summer morning. I was barely finished with my coffee when county code enforcement rolled up in their white pickup, the engine still ticking hot in my driveway. "Jake Thornton?" The inspector looked uncomfortable as sweat beaded on her forehead in the Texas heat. "We've received multiple complaints about code violations on your property. I'm required to conduct an immediate inspection." The paperwork she handed me was thicker than Sunday's newspaper. 14 separate violations, each typed in official bureaucratic language that made my head spin. Unsafe agricultural structures, noise ordinance breaches from cattle operations, improper waste management, even a complaint about noxious odors affecting neighboring properties. The smell of fresh bullshit was stronger than my actual bull pasture. "Ma'am," I said, feeling the rough texture of the citation papers between my weathered fingers, "this ranch has been operating since 1953. My granddaddy was raising cattle here before they invented half these regulations." She shrugged apologetically, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Sorry, sir. I just respond to complaints. Someone's been very thorough in documenting concerns about agricultural operations near residential areas. Each violation carried a $500 penalty if upheld, plus daily fines until corrected. $7,000 in potential penalties, with more citations promised if I didn't comply immediately." That evening, Tommy's voice crackled through my phone with news that made my blood pressure spike. "Jake, I found something interesting about that code enforcement inspection. The assistant director who approved the rush job, Rick Hartwick. Ring any bells? Brenda's brother-in-law? Bingo. Been fast-tracking every complaint with your name on it since March." While I was dealing with inspectors and violation notices, Tommy had been burning midnight oil researching agricultural protection laws. What he'd discovered was better than finding water in a drought. "You ever heard of the Texas Right to Farm Act?" he asked. I vaguely remembered reading about it years back when developers first started sniffing around our county. Something about protecting established farms from nuisance complaints when suburbs moved in later. "Your ranch doesn't just qualify, Jake, you're bulletproof. Agricultural operations established before 1980 get grandfathered protection that trumps local zoning enforcement. The state legislature already decided this fight 40 years ago. But I wanted more than just legal protection. If Brenda wanted to play the environmental card, I'd show her what real science looked like. Dr. Patricia Hernandez from Austin charged me $500 for comprehensive environmental testing, water samples, soil analysis, the full package. The wait for results felt longer than calving season, but when that report arrived, it was worth every penny and then some. My cattle operations actually improved local water quality through natural filtration and erosion control. The creek showed pristine conditions upstream, then increasing contamination as it flowed through Brenda's precious subdivision. Here's the kicker that made me laugh out loud. All those perfect HOA lawns required industrial quantities of chemicals. 3 properties showed illegal septic discharge, and Brenda's own house registered the highest contamination levels in the entire study area. Her immaculate yard was poisoning the very creek she claimed my cattle were ruining. The sound of irony was sweeter than Sunday church bells. My counterattack was methodical as a good fence repair. I filed environmental violations against the HOA with the county office, submitted Dr. Hernandez's report to the health department, and demanded $12,000 reimbursement for unnecessary inspections. But the real genius move was starting ranch education days every Saturday morning. Word of mouth brought curious neighbors who'd only heard Brenda's version of the story. The first Saturday, 15 families showed up. Kids laughed and pointed as calves played in crystal-clear creek water. Parents watched their children pet gentle bulls through the fence, realizing these dangerous animals were basically oversized puppies with attitude. The texture of healthy ranch soil crumbled between city fingers as I explained how cattle grazing prevented erosion and maintained natural grassland ecosystems. Compare that to the chemical-soaked dirt in their subdivision yards that wouldn't grow weeds without fertilizer. By the third Saturday, I had 23 cars in my driveway. 5 HOA families requested quarter steers for their freezers. The local 4-H club asked permission for youth agriculture programs. County Agricultural Extension Agent Maria Santos wrote a newspaper article praising my sustainable ranching practices. The smell of grilling burgers mixed with laughter as families picnicked beside the creek their HOA president claimed was contaminated. Children collected smooth creek stones while their parents discovered that working ranches weren't the enemy of suburban life. Poorly managed developments were. When Brenda drove by that Saturday afternoon in her white Escalade, engine purring with expensive precision, and saw the crowd of happy families on my property, her face went pale as winter frost. She'd been telling her neighbors I was destroying their community, but here they were, enjoying my ranch more than their sterile subdivision amenities. The war for public opinion was shifting, and we both knew it. She was losing the narrative, one educated neighbor at a time. Just when I thought Brenda couldn't sink any lower, she pulled out the nuclear option. Anonymous tip to the county health department about my cattle contaminating the local water supply. The kind of complaint that gets ranchers shut down faster than a bar fight on Saturday night. Mr. Thornton, we're here about potential groundwater contamination from your livestock operation. The health inspector's badge gleamed in the morning sun as he unloaded testing equipment from his county truck. Anonymous complaints suggest your cattle are creating public health hazards. We need to quarantine your herd pending investigation. The words hit me like a freight train loaded with financial ruin. Quarantine meant no cattle sales, no breeding operations, no income for potentially months while bureaucrats shuffled paperwork. With our mortgage 3 months behind and Sarah's medical bills from her surgery still mounting, a quarantine would destroy us faster than a tornado through a trailer park. The smell of fear mixed with my cooling coffee as I realized Brenda had found my financial throat and squeezed with both hands. She knew exactly what cattle quarantine would do to a ranch already hanging by a thread. Based on what specific evidence? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady while my pulse hammered against my collar. Anonymous complaint alleges runoff from your operation is affecting residential drinking water. State law requires immediate investigation of all potential public health threats. But here's where Brenda's brilliant plan face-planted harder than a drunk cowboy off a mechanical bull. See, I still had that environmental report from Dr. Hernandez sitting in my filing cabinet like a loaded gun waiting for the right target. Inspector, before you test one drop of water, you need to see this. I handed over the comprehensive environmental study, watching his expression shift from bureaucratic skepticism to genuine surprise. My ranch water tested cleaner than what most folks bought in bottles at the grocery store. The creek showed pristine conditions upstream that actually improved as it flowed through my cattle operation. Properly managed grazing created natural filtration systems that environmentalists dream about. The inspector's finger traced contamination charts while his frown deepened. These numbers from your property are excellent, but look at this downstream data. Page 12 of Dr. Hernandez's report contained the bombshell that would blow Brenda's world apart. 3 HOA properties showed illegal septic discharge directly into the creek system. Raw sewage from failed septic systems was creating genuine health hazards while she'd been blaming my cattle for imaginary problems. Jesus Christ, the inspector muttered, then caught himself. Sorry, sir, these contamination levels from the residential development. This is a Category 2 environmental violation. We're talking federal EPA involvement. The mini-twist kept getting sweeter. While I'd been defending my clean ranch, the HOA's perfect suburban paradise was poisoning the entire watershed with septic failures, lawn chemicals, and industrial runoff from their concrete-heavy development. My counterattack was swift as a striking hawk. I offered my ranch as a control site for expanded environmental monitoring, proving how real agriculture protected water quality better than suburban landscaping. The county paid me $1,500 monthly for testing access, money that helped cover the legal bills Brenda's harassment had created. But the real satisfaction came 3 days later, when the Millbrook County Gazette ran a front-page story that made my morning coffee taste like pure victory. Suburban development creates environmental crisis while falsely accusing local ranch. The sound of Brenda's world collapsing was beautiful music. Her real estate office phone rang constantly as clients canceled listings and demanded explanations. The texture of panic was visible in her shaking hands when she tried addressing the emergency HOA meeting that packed the community center beyond capacity. 200 angry homeowners discovered their monthly fees had funded environmental cover-ups while their own septic systems poisoned their drinking water. Property values crashed faster than the stock market in 2008. Insurance companies threatened coverage cancellation due to environmental liability. "Mrs. Hartwick," demanded Pete Kowalski, standing up in the crowded room where the smell of angry sweat mixed with expensive perfume, "did you know about the septic contamination when you filed that complaint against Jake's ranch?" Brenda's composure finally shattered like glass hitting concrete, face redder than a prize bull's hide, hands trembling as she shuffled through papers that couldn't provide answers to questions she'd never prepared for. The agricultural runoff concerns were, the environmental impacts of livestock are well documented in the literature. "That's complete bullshit," Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through the crowd noise like a blade. "My well water shows chemicals from neighborhood lawns, not his cattle. You lied to all of us." The crowd turned hostile faster than weather in tornado season. Voices demanding immediate resignation, full financial audit, emergency septic repairs that would cost each homeowner thousands of dollars they didn't have. 3 board members resigned that night rather than face potential criminal liability for environmental violations. The HOA's insurance company canceled their policy pending investigation. County Environmental Office imposed $50,000 in immediate fines for illegal discharge violations. As Sarah and I drove home past Brenda's house, we could see her through the kitchen window, still on the phone at 11 p.m., probably talking to lawyers about the lawsuits piling up like storm debris. "Think this will teach her to leave us alone?" Sarah asked. I squeezed her hand, watching Brenda's silhouette gesturing frantically in the yellow kitchen light. "Honey, desperate people do desperate things. She's not done yet." 3 weeks later, Tommy's voice crackled through my phone with barely contained excitement while I was mending fence in the back 40, sweat dripping onto sun-baked dirt under the afternoon heat. "Jake, drop that hammer and sit down. What I just found in the courthouse basement is going to change everything." The metallic ring of my hammer hitting steel posts stopped as his tone registered. In 6 months of legal research, I'd never heard Tommy this wound up. "I've been digging through the original 1972 development contracts, the ones your daddy signed when they built Sunset Meadows. Jake, there's an agricultural preservation clause written right into the HOA's founding documents." My weathered hands gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of clause?" "The developers promise to maintain your ranch operations in perpetuity as a condition of getting approval for the subdivision. Any attempt to interfere with your agricultural activities violates the HOA's original charter." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down hard on my truck tailgate, the hot metal burning through my jeans as my brain processed what he'd just said. "Tommy, are you telling me?" Every homeowner's deed includes agricultural preservation language. They all signed contracts promising to support and protect your ranch as part of their property purchase. Brenda hasn't been exercising legitimate authority. She's been violating the HOA's legal foundation. The smell of dusty paper and old ink filled my nostrils as I imagined those contracts, hidden in courthouse files for 50 years like buried treasure. My daddy had been smarter than I'd realized, protecting our ranch with legal language that outlasted his own lifetime. "But here's the smoking gun that's going to destroy her completely," Tommy continued, his voice dropping to a whisper like he was sharing state secrets. "Those agricultural impact fees she's been charging new home buyers, $1,500 per house for the past 8 years? My stomach clenched. "What agricultural impact fees?" "Exactly. She told homebuyers the money goes into a special environmental fund for managing ranch impacts. $127,000 collected. Problem is, Jake, that fund doesn't exist." The texture of rough fence wire bit into my palm as I gripped the post for support, Tommy's words hitting me like successive lightning strikes. "Where'd the money go?" "General HOA account. From there, $89,000 in consulting fees paid to companies Brenda controls. We're not talking about HOA harassment anymore, Jake. This is systematic embezzlement, mail fraud, racketeering." The afternoon sun felt suddenly colder as the full magnitude crashed over me like a tidal wave. Brenda hadn't been targeting my ranch out of petty tyranny or power games. She'd been running a criminal enterprise, stealing from every neighbor while violating the very legal agreements that created their community. "There's more." Tommy's voice carried the satisfaction of a prosecutor with a slam-dunk case. "I found her pattern in Dallas. Same playbook at her previous HOA. Agricultural harassment, mysterious consulting fees, financial irregularities. forced to resign in 2019 after audit discovered $43,000 in missing funds. My hands shook as I realized the scope of what we'd uncovered. Serial embezzlement, federal crimes, a career criminal who'd been using homeowner associations as personal ATMs while destroying rural communities for profit. The sound of cattle lowing in the distance mixed with Tommy's continued legal analysis, but my mind was racing ahead to the implications. Every harassment complaint, every code violation, every environmental scare had been calculated, moves in a criminal conspiracy to steal my land and loot the HOA treasury. "So what's our next move?" I asked, though revenge was already tasting sweet as honey on my tongue. "We let her dig deeper," Tommy said, "because now we're not defending your ranch, Jake. We're taking down a federal criminal, and desperate criminals always make the biggest mistakes." That night, Sarah and I sat at our kitchen table with legal documents spread like battle plans across the scarred oak surface, the smell of her fresh brewed coffee mixing with the sweet scent of impending justice. Tommy had delivered everything: original agricultural preservation agreements, bank records documenting Brenda's 8-year theft spree, and a criminal referral that would make federal prosecutors smile. "So what's the plan?" Sarah asked, her calloused fingers tracing property boundary maps that proved our ranch's federally protected status. I leaned back in my chair, listening to 12 prize bulls settling into their evening routine, and grinned like a man holding 4 aces. We're gonna let Brenda destroy herself, but first, we set the perfect trap. The next morning started with strategic hardware upgrades. Every gate connecting my ranch to HOA property got heavy-duty hinges and quick-release latches, the kind that looked normal but opened fast when needed. The metallic snap of spring-loaded mechanisms felt solid under my weathered hands as I tested each latch repeatedly. My cattle management system needed tactical modifications. I repositioned feed stations to create natural movement corridors, guiding my bulls toward specific exit points like channels in a river. 1,200 pounds of territorial Angus beef could cover 40 acres in minutes with proper motivation. The thunderous pound of hooves during practice runs echoed across the pastures like approaching cavalry. While I worked the physical angles, Tommy assembled our legal nuclear arsenal. Emergency property survey motion to establish exact boundaries. Federal criminal complaint documenting systematic embezzlement. Civil rights violation under the Fair Housing Act for discriminatory agricultural harassment. "Jake, here's something most ranchers don't know," Tommy explained over barbecue and beer in my kitchen, the texture of legal papers rough between his fingers. "When someone interferes with federally protected agricultural operations, it becomes a civil rights case. Triple damages, attorney fees, criminal conspiracy charges. The penalties get serious fast." The beauty of our strategy was elegant simplicity. We didn't need to prove Brenda wrong about boundaries or environmental concerns. We just needed to document her violating federal laws while systematically stealing from her own neighbors. But the real masterstroke was psychological warfare through community education. My ranch heritage days transformed Brenda's attacks into teaching moments, turning her victims into my allies one Saturday at a time. The sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversations as 30 families showed up that first weekend. Kids petted gentle bulls while parents discovered that working ranches preserved natural ecosystems better than suburban developments ever could. "Most folks don't realize," I explained while demonstrating rotational grazing, the smell of healthy soil rich in my nostrils, "that properly managed cattle improve land health and prevent erosion. Compare that to suburban lawns that need constant chemicals just to stay green." Mrs. Patterson raised her hand, voice carrying across the crowd. "So, when Brenda claimed your ranch contaminated our water, she was covering up real contamination from failed septic systems throughout the HOA," I replied, letting that truth sink in while children splashed in our crystal-clear creek. By the 4th Saturday, my waiting list exceeded 50 families. 7 households ordered quarter steers for their freezers. The county agricultural extension brought newspaper reporters to document conservation practices that put suburban landscaping to shame. Meanwhile, I built a forensic accounting database that would make FBI investigators proud. Every suspicious transaction, every no-bid contract, every mysterious consulting fee paid to Brenda's shell companies. 8 years of systematic theft documented with bank statements and canceled checks. The most damaging evidence came from homebuyer interviews. 42 families confirmed paying agricultural impact fees they believed funded environmental protection. None had received documentation about where $1,500 per household actually went. "This is a prosecutor's dream," Tommy said, reviewing evidence files thick enough to choke a horse. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. She's looking at serious federal prison time." But patience was key. Brenda's criminal pattern showed escalating desperation when cornered, leading to bigger mistakes that provided better evidence. I wanted her to commit the crime that would destroy her completely while maximum witnesses watched. My security system captured every HOA resident visiting my ranch, documenting community support that contradicted Brenda's lies about neighborhood opposition. Motion-activated cameras monitored all boundaries, ready to record trespassing or property damage attempts. Sarah helped create presentation materials for the upcoming HOA annual meeting. Financial charts showing embezzlement patterns, harassment timeline with photo evidence, copies of agricultural preservation contracts proving Brenda had violated her legal duties for years. The final bait was spreading rumors about my financial desperation through sympathetic neighbors. Word reached Brenda that I was considering selling to overseas developers, creating the perfect opportunity for her most desperate gambit. "She'll try one final property grab," I predicted, sipping coffee that tasted like approaching victory. "Something big and public that'll give us maximum evidence and maximum witnesses." The trap was set, physical preparations complete, legal ammunition loaded, community support solidified. All that remained was letting Brenda's greed and arrogance lead her into the perfect storm I'd created. The taste of justice was getting sweeter every day. 2 weeks later, the sound of engines rumbling up my gravel driveway at dawn announced Brenda's most desperate move yet. Through my kitchen window, I watched 3 black SUVs and a security company truck arrive like some kind of paramilitary invasion, dust clouds swirling in the morning light. "Mr. Thornton!" Brenda's voice carried the shrill authority of someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. She marched toward my porch in a designer pantsuit that had no business being in ranch country, flanked by 4 security guards in tactical gear who looked increasingly uncomfortable with whatever they'd been hired to do. I stepped outside in my worn bathrobe, coffee mug steaming in my hand, watching the circus with the calm satisfaction of a man who'd been expecting exactly this moment for weeks. "By emergency authority of the Sunset Meadows HOA, we're declaring your property temporarily seized for immediate public safety violations," she announced, waving a thick folder of official-looking documents like a battle flag. The smell of fresh-cut grass from the HOA development mixed with dust kicked up by her convoy, creating an almost surreal contrast to the peaceful morning sounds of my cattle lowing in the distance. "Seized?" I asked, taking a deliberate sip of coffee that tasted like approaching victory. "On whose authority exactly?" "County Health Department emergency order," she replied, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to project confidence she didn't feel. "Immediate cessation of all agricultural activities pending environmental remediation." The biggest security guard shifted his weight nervously, clearly realizing this wasn't the legitimate government operation he'd been told about. The texture of his tactical vest creaked as he looked around my obviously well-maintained property, probably wondering what emergency could possibly justify this kind of response. "Interesting," I said, pulling out my phone with deliberate slowness. "Mind if I call the health department to verify that order right now?" Brenda's face flushed redder than August heat. "The situation requires immediate action to protect community welfare. These security personnel will monitor your property to ensure full compliance with emergency protocols." What she didn't know was that every word was being recorded by multiple hidden cameras, every illegal threat documented with timestamp precision. My attorney Tommy was already driving toward my ranch with emergency court documents, and Sheriff Martinez had been briefed about potential criminal trespassing. Over the next 3 days, my network of sympathetic HOA members revealed the true scope of Brenda's final desperate gambit. Mrs. Patterson slipped me photocopies of internal emails that made my blood pressure spike like summer thermometer readings. Brenda had been secretly negotiating with Meridian Development Corporation, promising them access to my ranch for a massive residential expansion that would triple the size of Sunset Meadows. The deal included a $150,000 consulting fee for her personally, plus ongoing commissions on hundreds of new property sales. The security guards weren't just intimidation, they were advanced preparation for surveying teams that would map my property for immediate subdivision. She'd bet her entire criminal career on one final theft, stealing my ranch and cashing out before the embezzlement investigations caught up with her. The mini twist that guaranteed her destruction came when I examined those official health department documents more carefully. Real county letterhead, authentic-looking formatting, but completely fabricated content with forged signatures and seal numbers that didn't exist in any government database. Federal mail fraud, document forgery, criminal conspiracy. She'd just committed enough felonies to earn serious prison time while I captured every moment on high-definition security footage. My counterintelligence operation shifted into overdrive. I let the security contractors believe they were gathering intelligence about my financial desperation, feeding them carefully crafted misinformation about mounting debts and potential property sales. The smooth texture of fabricated bank statements felt almost too easy to create as I planted evidence of supposed financial distress. Those same contractors unknowingly documented Brenda's criminal conspiracy with their daily reports, timestamps, photographs, detailed property observations that would prove premeditated planning for illegal seizure in any federal courtroom. The community reaction was swift and devastating. The sound of ringing phones filled the HOA office as residents demanded answers about their president's increasingly erratic behavior. 3 more board members resigned rather than face criminal liability, and the association's insurance company canceled coverage pending investigation. Pete Kowalski called with news that made the whole picture even darker. Jake, 17 of us got property tax reassessment notices this week, all increased because of environmental contamination concerns from your ranch. The taste of pure rage mixed with my morning coffee as I realized Brenda had been feeding false information to county assessors, artificially devaluing neighboring properties to benefit her development partners. Systematic fraud that damaged every family in the community. But I forced myself to stay patient. Desperate criminals make their biggest mistakes when they think victory is within reach. I wanted Brenda to commit one final, completely indefensible crime while maximum witnesses watched her destroy herself. The scent of justice hung in the morning air as thick as humidity before a thunderstorm. 8 years of systematic theft, federal crimes captured in high definition, a career criminal about to face consequences that would echo through federal prison for years to come. She'd revealed her complete hand. Time to show her mind. Brenda's final overreach came exactly 1 week later, and it was so audacious it took my breath away. The sound of car engines and excited voices drifted across my property at sunrise as I discovered what she'd done overnight. Transformed my private ranch into an unauthorized festival ground for nearly 1,000 strangers. Sunrise Festival 2024, a community celebration, read the professionally printed banners strung between my fence posts. Families were already setting up tents in my pastures, grilling breakfast on portable stoves, while their children asked each other where the bathroom facilities were located. The smell of bacon and camping fuel mixed with my growing rage as I realized the scope of Brenda's theft. She'd sent out official-looking invitations to the entire county, advertising my private ranch as community recreational land, and charging $50 per family for 3-day camping permits. "Welcome to Sunset Meadows Community Heritage Festival," Brenda's amplified voice echoed across my property from a temporary stage erected near my cattle barn. "We're so excited to share this beautiful natural space with families throughout Millbrook County. 900 people. $45,000 in admission fees collected for trespassing on my private property. The largest theft in Brenda's criminal career, committed in broad daylight with hundreds of witnesses documenting every moment on social media. I walked through the chaos in my work clothes, stopping families who assumed I was festival staff. "Excuse me, folks, but who gave you permission to camp here?" "The HOA president sold us camping permits," replied a confused father setting up a large family tent. "Said this was community land available for public recreation." The texture of his legitimate-looking permit felt official under my fingers, complete with fake county seals and fabricated environmental approval stamps. Brenda had created an entire fraudulent permitting system to legitimize her property theft. But here's where her desperation revealed the criminal mind behind 8 years of embezzlement. She'd hired the same security company to manage the festival, paying them with stolen HOA funds to enforce access to land she didn't own. The mini twist that sealed her fate came when I discovered she'd been advertising the festival for months, collecting deposits and selling merchandise through her real estate company. This wasn't a spontaneous, desperate act. It was a premeditated criminal conspiracy planned down to the smallest detail. My documentation went into overdrive. Every conversation recorded, every fraudulent permit photographed, Every security guard interaction captured on multiple camera angles. The evidence was so overwhelming that federal prosecutors would need filing cabinets just to hold it all. Meanwhile, the festival chaos provided perfect cover for my final preparations. While families enjoyed their unauthorized camping experience, I quietly positioned my 12 bulls in the pasture closest to the main camping area, separated by only a single gate that opened with one quick latch. The sound of children's laughter mixed with cattle snorting as my bulls watched the invasion of their territory with growing territorial aggression. 1,200 pounds of protective instinct per bull, getting more agitated by the hour as strangers violated their personal space. Local news stations arrived to cover the community celebration, unknowingly documenting Brenda's criminal enterprise in real time. The taste of perfect irony was sweeter than Sarah's apple pie as reporters interviewed the woman stealing my land about her commitment to community building. "This festival represents everything our HOA stands for," Brenda told Channel 7 News, standing on my private property while collecting money from trespassers. "Bringing families together in natural settings that benefit everyone." The sheriff's department had been quietly monitoring the situation on my request, ready to respond when I gave the signal. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh reviewed our evidence files and approved arrest warrants for multiple felonies. Federal agents prepared search warrants for Brenda's financial records. But the most satisfying element was watching HOA residents realize they'd been funding their own community's destruction. Mrs. Patterson called that evening, voice shaking with anger. "Jake, I just found out Brenda used our HOA dues to pay for festival security. She's been stealing from us to fund crimes against you." By Sunday afternoon, nearly 40 HOA members had gathered at Pete Kowalski's house, demanding emergency board action to remove Brenda before criminal charges destroyed their property values completely. The sound of angry voices carried across the subdivision like approaching thunder. The festival campsite looked like a small city by evening. Hundreds of tents, portable toilets, food vendors, and families settling in for their final night on what they believed was legitimate community land. The scent of campfire smoke drifted across my pastures where my bulls waited with growing impatience. Everything was perfect. Maximum witnesses, complete evidence documentation, federal crimes committed in high definition with news media coverage, the largest crowd possible to witness Brenda's complete destruction. As I lay in bed that night, listening to festival noise drifting through my bedroom window, I smiled with the satisfaction of a man whose patience was about to pay off spectacularly. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. sharp, Brenda Hartwick would learn why you never steal a Texas rancher's land. The bulls were ready, the cameras were rolling, justice was 12 hours away. At exactly 6 a.m., I walked across my dewy pasture to the gate separating my bulls from 900 sleeping trespassers. The morning air hung thick with anticipation, and the distant sound of coffee brewing in camping stoves across my stolen land. "Easy, boys," I whispered to my 12 Angus bulls, their massive forms silhouetted against the sunrise as they watched me approach the gate latch. 8 years of harassment, $45,000 in theft, federal crimes committed on my family's property. Time for justice. The metallic click of the gate latch echoed across the pasture like a gunshot. Then I stepped back and watched nature take its course. 1,200 pounds of territorial fury per bull, thundering across 40 acres of campsite like a cattle stampede from the Old West. The sound was magnificent, hooves pounding earth, camping chairs clattering, and the rising crescendo of 900 voices screaming in unison as they realized their peaceful festival had become a rodeo. "Get away from me! Someone call 911 right now!" Brenda's shriek cut through the chaos as she scrambled out of her luxury RV, designer pajamas flapping while my lead bull charged past her folding table covered with cash boxes and permit applications. $45,000 in stolen camping fees scattered across the pasture like confetti as tables flipped and tents collapsed under the stampede. The visual chaos was everything I'd dreamed of during 6 months of legal preparation. Families in pajamas climbing mesquite trees faster than their children could follow. Expensive camping gear trampled under hooves that had been peacefully grazing until strangers invaded their territory. Portable toilets overturning as people fled in every direction at once. But the real satisfaction came when Sheriff Martinez arrived with arrest warrants, followed by news crews capturing everything in high-definition glory. The smell of dust kicked up by stampeding bulls mixed with the sweet scent of long-awaited justice. Brenda Hartwick, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, conspiracy, and multiple federal crimes, Sheriff Martinez announced, handcuffs glinting in the morning sun as Brenda tried to maintain authority while chaos erupted around her. "This is my festival. These are legitimate community activities," she screamed, waving cash-filled envelopes that proved her criminal enterprise even as bulls thundered past her overturned merchandise booth. That's when I made my entrance, walking calmly through the stampede with professional surveyor Hank Morrison and my attorney Tommy, all of us wearing satisfied grins as wide as the Texas sky. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced loudly enough for news cameras to capture every word, "welcome to my private ranch. You're all trespassing on 3 generations of Thornton family land." The crowd's attention shifted from fleeing bulls to the man they'd just realized owned the property they'd been camping on illegally. Tommy stepped forward with official documents that would destroy Brenda's lies permanently. "These are the original 1972 agricultural preservation agreements," he announced, holding up contracts that proved the HOA was legally required to protect my ranch, not steal from it. "Every homeowner's deed includes language promising to support Mr. Thornton's agricultural operations. Your HOA president has been violating her legal obligations while systematically embezzling from your community funds." The mic drop moment came when I pointed to steel boundary markers that GPS survey had established months earlier. Every single tent, every single car, every single person standing here is on private property that's been protected by federal agricultural rights laws since before most of you were born. Brenda's face went white as courthouse marble as she realized her entire criminal empire was collapsing on live television. Federal agents arrived to execute search warrants on her financial records. The HOA's attorney announced immediate dissolution of the board pending criminal investigation. "Mrs. Hartwick collected $45,000 selling camping permits to land she doesn't own," Sheriff Martinez announced for the benefit of news cameras. "She's also under investigation for 8 years of systematic embezzlement from Homeowner Association funds." The sound of handcuffs clicking around Brenda's wrists was the sweetest music I'd heard since my wedding day. 900 witnesses watched their festival organizer arrested for multiple felonies, while my bulls grazed peacefully in the background, their territorial duty completed. "But we paid for permits," shouted confused campers as they packed up scattered gear. "You paid a criminal who was stealing your money," Tommy replied. "Mr. Thornton has never authorized camping on his private property, and the HOA has no legal authority to grant such permissions." As families loaded their cars and departed my property, many stopped to apologize for the misunderstanding and ask about purchasing beef directly from my ranch. The taste of vindication was sweeter than Sarah's homemade pie as I realized Brenda's theft had actually introduced hundreds of potential customers to my operation. By noon, my ranch was peaceful again. Brenda was in county jail facing federal charges. The news media had their story about HOA corruption and agricultural rights, and I had $45,000 in recovered damages, plus documentation for a civil lawsuit that would bankrupt her completely. Justice served, Texas style. The aftermath was swift and satisfying as summer rain on drought-cracked earth. Within 30 days, Brenda Hartwick pleaded guilty to 14 federal charges, including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. 18 months in federal prison, plus full restitution of $68,000 for my damages and $89,000 for the embezzled HOA funds. The taste of complete victory was sweeter than I'd imagined during those dark months when she'd seemed untouchable. Sarah and I used the settlement money to pay off our ranch mortgage early, something my granddaddy would have been proud to see. The sound of that final payment hitting the bank account echoed through our kitchen like church bells on Sunday morning. But the real satisfaction came from the community transformation that followed Brenda's downfall. The new HOA board, elected unanimously by residents who'd learned painful lessons about unchecked authority, appointed me to serve as agricultural relations advisor with veto power over any decisions affecting ranch operations. "Never again," Pete Kowalski said at the emergency meeting where they approved my position. "We're putting protections in place so no future board can harass our agricultural neighbors." The HOA bylaws got rewritten to include specific agricultural protection language, ensuring that working ranches would be supported rather than attacked. 3 other local ranchers reported that harassment from their HOA neighbors ended immediately after news of Brenda's conviction spread through the county. My ranch heritage days evolved into something bigger and more meaningful than I'd ever expected. What started as defensive community education became a thriving agritourism partnership with Millbrook County that brings in $30,000 annually in additional income. The smell of barbecue smoke from our monthly community gatherings now drifts across property lines that once divided neighbors, bringing families together instead of driving them apart. Children who'd never seen cattle up close now bottle feed orphaned calves and collect eggs from our chicken coop. But the legacy I'm proudest of is the Bulls and Books Scholarship Fund Sarah and I established with $50,000 from the settlement. Every year we award full college scholarships to students pursuing agricultural degrees, ensuring the next generation understands the value of working farms and ranches. The first recipient was Marcus Peterson, Pete Kowalski's grandson, who's studying sustainable agriculture at Texas A&M. The texture of his firm handshake reminded me of my own determination at his age, back when I thought hard work alone could solve any problem. "Mr. Thornton," he said at the scholarship presentation, "what you did showed our whole community that standing up for what's right still matters." The irony wasn't lost on me that Brenda's criminal enterprise had accidentally created the strongest agricultural protection program in county history. Her attempts to destroy my ranch resulted in federal recognition of our conservation practices, state-level agricultural protection legislation, and a documentary film about property rights that aired on PBS. 3 years later, property values in Sunset Meadows had recovered completely. Turns out that living next to a working ranch actually increased home values by 8% once residents understood the environmental and community benefits of agricultural operations. I still chuckle every morning when I see families jogging on the community trail, the one that now runs legally along my property boundary with proper easement agreements and liability insurance. The sound of children's laughter mixing with cattle lowing creates a harmony that suburban developments without agricultural neighbors never achieve. Brenda's house sold at auction to cover her legal debts, purchased by a young ranching family who transformed the sterile landscape into productive vegetable gardens that supply our community farmers market. Last month, the county commissioners named our creek the Thornton Agricultural Preserve, in recognition of 3 generations of conservation practices that kept the watershed healthy while surrounding development degraded environmental quality. As I write this, Sarah's making coffee in our debt-free kitchen while 12 contented bulls graze in pastures that will never again face threats from power-hungry HOA tyrants. The morning light streaming through our windows illuminates framed newspaper articles about our victory and thank you letters from families who learned that working farms strengthen communities instead of threatening them. The lesson couldn't be clearer. When petty tyrants attack honest people, they usually end up destroying themselves.
So Jack got his ranch back. Brenda got 18 months in federal prison, and 900 confused campers learned why you should always check who actually owns the land before you build the tent. But here's what really matters about Jack's story. He didn't win because he had bigger balls or louder lawyers. He won because he understood something most people forget when dealing with bullies. Documentation based intimidation every single time. While Brenda was busy playing dictator and stealing money, Jack was quietly winning an airtight case with property surveys, financial records, and those original 1972 contracts that proved the HOA was supposed to protect his land, not destroy it. The festival wasn't revenge. It was Brenda's final mistake. Jack just gave her enough rope to hang herself with, then opened the gates after she committed enough federal crime to warranty prison time. Every neighborhood has someone who thinks a little bit of authority makes them untouchable. So the question is, when your local tyrant comes for your property rights, will you be ready? What's the craziest thing about an HOA had tried in your neighborhood? Tell me in the comments. Some of these stories are wilder than fiction. If watching Brenda's story made your day, hit that subscribe button. We got more dozen stories about HOA bullies getting exactly what they deserve. Remember knowing your rights, document everything, and never underestimate the power of very territorial livestock.